Hi there. My name is Daryl Boone, and this is Board Gems, my video series talking about those old classic board games that maybe people aren't talking so much about anymore, but are games that I really want to highlight because, darn it, games are still good. Just because newer games come along, the old games are still good. Today, I'm going to be talking about Ave Caesar, which is a game designed by Wolfgang Riedesser and was published originally by Ravensburger in 1989. It's been reprinted several times over the years. In 2006, we have the Pro Ludo edition, and this was the only edition released in English, I believe. And most recently in 2015 by Grow Games in Brazil. This is a Portuguese edition. Rules-wise, they're all identical. They just feature different track layouts. Also, in the early 2000s, we have this edition, which was from Japan. The company was called Mobius Games. And even though it's been rethemed, as you can see, it's kind of a sci-fi theme. It is functionally identical to Ave Caesar and features the same tracks as the original 1989 Ravensburger edition. The game is for 3 to 6 players, but not really. It's for 4 to 6 players, really. You can play it with 3 or even 2 if you're willing to have each player play multiple colors. Not recommended. This is a 4 to 6 player game in my opinion. It's a racing game, and each race takes about 20 to 30 minutes. The rule books generally say that if you want to play a full game of it, because the game is quite lucky, there's a lot of randomness, so if you want to even out the randomness and you want to play multiple races, play 4 different races, which would take well over an hour. I never play that way. I just play one race at a time as a nice, quick, light board game. So in this video, first we're going to talk about how to play Ave Caesar, and then later on we'll talk about why I think it's a board gem. To set up the game, players first choose a track. The Ravensburger and Mobius editions feature different sides of the board, one side for 3 to 4 players and one side for 5 to 6. And each side of the board has 2 different tracks, so players should set up the appropriate side and choose one of the 2 routes featured. For other editions like this one, the Grow Games edition, you can choose either side of the board for ideally 4 to 6 players. There's only one route on each side, but you can choose whether to play clockwise or counterclockwise. The tracks are subtly different and both ways work fine. Each player gets a chariot, a coin, and a deck of cards, all of the same color. Players should shuffle up their decks and determine the start player. One way to do that is for each player to split their deck, with the highest revealed card going first, and repeating the process in the case of a tie. The start player will place their chariot behind the starting line on the 1 space. Then the other players in clockwise order will place them on the next spaces. So the next player to their left will place on the 2 space, then the next player in clockwise order will place on the 3, and so on. Now there was actually a little bit of a disagreement as to whether this is one giant space or 2 different spaces. I played this game with a pretty famous board gamer from a long time ago, and he swears that that's 1 space. I disagree, or at the very least, I prefer to treat it as 2 spaces. Makes the track a little bit longer, a little bit more challenging. That's what you want in this game. Each player will take their coin and hang on to it, and then draw 3 cards from the top of their deck to form their starting hand. The start player would obviously go first and play his clockwise from there, clockwise around the table. The goal of the game is, well, to win the race. Players will race around the track 3 times, 3 laps. At one point during the race, after the first or the second lap, players must pit, so to speak, by entering the alley next to the finish line. If they don't, they're disqualified. Then by the end of the 3rd lap, the player who crosses the finish line first wins. On a player's turn, they must play a card from their hand and move their chariot forward that many spaces, then draw a card so they have a hand of 3 again. Discards are never reshuffled into the deck. This is important. The cards you have in your draw pile, that's all the cards you will have. Every card that you play, you will only ever play that card once. The cards are numbered 1 to 6. You must move the full distance shown on the card. If you cannot do so, you cannot play the card. And if you cannot play any card from your hand, you must pass. You play nothing and you don't move. Except for one exception, which I'll tell you about later, you may not choose to pass. If you are able to play a card and move, you must do so. Moving is very simple. From the space you're in, moving forward 1 space means moving to the space either directly ahead or diagonally left or right. You cannot move sideways, there must always be forward movement. In some areas, lanes are separated by a wall. You cannot move diagonally through a wall. You also cannot move through or over a space containing another player's chariot. You can move diagonally between, for example, the wall and a chariot, or between 2 chariots. That's allowed. There's a special restriction for playing a 6 card, the highest card. Generally, you cannot play a 6 if you are in the lead or tied for the lead. So if you have a hand of 3 6s and you're in the lead, you must pass. An exception to this rule is the very first turn, when everyone is tied at the starting line. Everybody's tied for the lead, right? So the start player can, in that case, play a 6. That's allowed. In some places on the track, there are bottlenecks, areas that are only 1 lane wide. If a chariot occupies that space, players behind them cannot pass. Now, if this player is in the lead and they have all 6s, then they are allowed to play a 6, which would otherwise not be allowed, but they're able to in this case, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to finish the race. No one would. So in this case, it's allowed to play a 6. But only if you have a hand full of 6s and you have no other choice. Okay, what's the catch? Well, each player has the same deck of cards for each of the numbers 1 to 6. Like I said, once you play a card, it's out of the game. For the most part, your deck of cards, your 24 cards, are just barely enough to help you finish 3 laps. You'll notice in a few areas the track splits into 2 lanes separated by a wall. Often the outside lane has more spaces than the inside. In general, players want to take the inside lane, but sometimes they can't. Maybe it's blocked. And sometimes they'll want to, or even have to, play a high card and take the outside in order to get in front of another player, or to move forward at all. But if you take the longer route, too many times, that's risky. You might not have enough cards left in your deck to finish the full 3 laps. You might run out of gas, so to speak, just before reaching the finish line. Each player starts the game with a coin. They cannot finish the game with their coin. They must give it up before crossing the finish line, and the only way to do that is to praise Caesar. Near the finish line is what's called the Emperor's Alley. At the end of the first lap or the second lap, a player must take this side route. When they end their turn on any of the spaces in the Emperor's Alley, they should stand up, toss their coin into the box, and exclaim, "Ave Caesar!" This is important. Don't let shy players off the hook. Everybody has to do this. All players must do this once during the game. If you don't do it at the end of the first lap, then you must do it at the end of the second, if you're able. If other players are blocking the entrance at the end of the second lap, then you are allowed to pass instead of being forced to play a card and fly past and be disqualified. That's the one exception to voluntarily passing that I mentioned earlier. Note that for some tracks, one direction of play makes it impossible to enter the alley if you are in the inner lane. So if you don't take the correct approach, no amount of passing is going to help you. The game ends when all players cross the finish line or run out of cards. For a single race, you can just stop when one player crosses, or you can keep playing to determine place. For multiple races, let everyone finish, then award points based on place. The rulebook suggests 6 points for first, and then 4 points, then 3, then 2, then 1, and 0 points for 6th place or failing to finish. I like to play 9 points for first, then 6, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1 point for a 6th place finish, and 0 points for failing to finish. That's it. You're ready to play Ave Caesar. There's a reason why I chose Ave Caesar as the first real board gem that I'm going to highlight in this video series, and that's because it's my favorite board game of all time. I like to think that's saying a lot, since I've been in the hobby for over 15 years and I've played a lot of board games in that time. But sometimes I feel like I have to justify my opinion on it, because it is such a simple game. It's a family game. There's not a huge amount of strategy to it. So why is this my favorite game compared to everything else out there? Certainly the simplicity is a factor. I can teach this game to anybody. It's pretty short, 20 to 30 minutes, like I said, for one race. And it's just a lot of fun in terms of the interaction with players. Many racing games have this order in play, in which the player who's in the lead goes first and the player who's second goes next, and so on, which gives an advantage to the first player, but it also kind of spaces players out, and there's not as much kind of interaction. There's certainly no blocking. That's why they do it that way. They don't want people to block each other. In this game, it's all about the blocking. It's all about getting in front of somebody else, especially somebody later than you in turn order, and then you get in front, you get into that bottleneck, you block them, and then the person to your left kind of curses under their breath and is like, I have to pass. And it's just laughs all around, and just plays so quick. The decisions are a little automatic. You only have 3 cards in your hand, and you have to play one if you're able, so you have 3 choices every turn. But also, obviously, there's no analysis paralysis. I just love the interactivity of it. I love the kind of the cheers and the groans that experience. I happen to love racing games anyway. There's a lot of racing games that I love. And just Ave Caesar, for its simplicity, for its just kind of hootin' and hollering kind of experience, is my favorite game of all time. Short story. One time, Tom Felber, the former head of the Spiel des Jahres jury, had visited our restaurant, gave a little speech. He was doing a tour of board game cafes and restaurants in North America. And everybody at the table, it wasn't a big table, but everybody at the table kind of introduced themselves. And when I introduced myself, I mentioned my favorite board game was Ave Caesar, which maybe says something about me. And in my memory, I don't know if this is true. This is time maybe playing tricks on me. But I could swear when I said that, Tom Felber went, like, he knows, right? Somebody who thinks Ave Caesar is their favorite game, that says something about that person. And that's what that says about me. For modern hobbyists, it's going to be almost too simple. I find a lot of new games that come out these days, they have complexity for complexity's sake, because that's what people want. I love complexity if it's in service to the theme, or if it's important to the style of game. But a lot of games I feel have complexity for complexity's sake, and honestly, I would just rather have a game in which the rules just melt away, and all that's left is just the player interaction. You're not even really thinking about your turns so much. Your turns are almost automatic. And in the end, a little story was told in the race. So that's Ave Caesar for me. My favorite game of all time. Now, as I showed you, there's many different versions. So I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about each one and whether I would recommend them or not. First we have, of course, the original Ave Caesar edition, which I got from a collector in Germany. Still in shrink, which was quite exciting, but I opened it because, like I said, it's my favorite game. The box is annoying. It's super long, hard to fit on a shelf, but it's a nice big board. The presentation is great, and it has the most variety of tracks in the box. So this is probably still my favorite edition. And I also like QJet as well because, again, it's the same edition. It's the same, not the same edition, it's the same tracks. So it plays exactly the same way. So I would have both. I had both for the longest time. This would be, the Ravensburger edition would be my stay-at-home version. And QJet, which is in a very small box, let's see if I can reach it from here. It's a very small box, as you can see. So this was my kind of portable version if I wanted to take it somewhere to a restaurant and play Ave Caesar with my friends. Of all the editions, the one that I recommend the least is the only one that had an English edition, which is the Pro Ludo edition. The reason is because the tracks, first of all, there's less variety of tracks out of the box, but also Ave Caesar is the most fun, and one of the real catches about the game is that you just have barely enough cards to finish, maybe a little bit extra. So you can go around the outside, you can take that long path and try to get in front of other players, but there's a risk if you do that too many times, you won't be able to finish. So it's important that the tracks are a certain length, right? Too long and the game is too hard, too short and the game is too easy. And the Pro Ludo edition errs on the easy side. The tracks are shorter, and as a result, they're less fun, in my opinion. They're still fine, especially if you have a large number of players, 5 or 6 players. But out of all the editions, that's the one I would recommend the least. The newest edition, the Brazilian Portuguese edition from Grow Games, is basically a fixed version of that. There's one track, which is almost identical to the Pro Ludo edition, but has a little bit more challenge to it, which I appreciate. And the Grow Games edition, let me get it here, also has the single most brutal track out of all the editions. So that's this one here I'm talking about. I don't know if you have a chance to play. There is or was an iOS version, maybe Android 2, that Grow Games put out for Ave Caesar, multiplayer. But if you can't find any matches for online play, it'll add AI players. And in that version, it had the track I'm talking about, which was a single most brutal track of all the editions. And that's why, for me, as a fan of Ave Caesar, I had to have this edition, just to have that one track. The presentation in all of them is completely fine. The board in the Portuguese edition is big, but it's not very good, and the QJet board is really poor quality. Although it does make it up for these beautiful little metal ships. It's really quite nice. So if you are also a fan of Ave Caesar and you had one edition to get, I would probably recommend you get the Grow Games edition, imported from Brazil if you have to. Like the Pro Ludo edition, there aren't that many tracks available for it. There's just 2 tracks, which you can race clockwise or counterclockwise, but the tracks are really good. If you can find an edition of QJet or the Ravensburger edition of Ave Caesar, go for that as well. That's probably the definitive edition. But if you can't find that easily, definitely go for this one, the Brazilian edition. Give the English version a pass unless you have no other choice. That's my opinion as an Ave Caesar fan. That's my thoughts. It's definitely a board gem for me. Like I said, this came out in 1989, so it's 30 years old at the time of recording. And it's still my favorite game. So I'm happy to have a chance to share it with you. Thanks for watching Board Gems.